Hello, everyone. Welcome back to English Conversations, the podcast where we help you learn English while talking about exciting topics that matter in your daily life.
Hi, everyone. We're thrilled to have you with us today. Here's a question to start us off. What's one goal you've set for yourself recently? Think about it for a moment.
Today's episode is all about personal goals, both short-term and long-term, and how we can make plans for the future. Whether you're learning a new language, starting a new hobby, or dreaming of a big career change, this episode is for you.
By the end of today's episode, you'll not only learn useful English phrases to talk about your goals, but you'll also walk away with tips to achieve them. Plus, we've got a fun role play and practical advice to keep you inspired.
So, stay tuned and don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us about your short-term and long-term goals. We'd love to hear them.
Let's dive in. Goals are an essential part of our lives. They give us direction and help us grow. But have you ever thought about the difference between short-term and long-term goals?
Good question, James. Short-term goals are things we can achieve quickly, maybe in a few days, weeks, or months. Long-term goals, on the other hand, take more time, sometimes years, and require consistent effort.
For example, a short-term goal might be learning 10 new English words this week. A long-term goal could be becoming fluent in English within 2 years.
Exactly. So, listeners, think about it. What's one short-term goal you're working on right now? Share it in the comments. To make this clearer, let's listen to a short conversation between two friends, Emily and Jack, as they talk about their goals.
Hey Jack, do you have any goals you're working on these days?
Yeah, actually. My short-term goal is to save enough money to buy a new laptop by next month.
That's a great goal. How are you saving up?
I'm cutting back on eating out and making coffee at home instead of buying it every day. It's amazing how much I can save by doing that. What about you?
Well, my short-term goal is to wake up an hour earlier every day so I can exercise before work.
That's a healthy habit. Do you have any long-term goals?
Definitely. I want to run a marathon someday. It'll take a lot of training, but I'm determined.
Let's break down some key phrases from that conversation. Short-term goal, a goal you want to achieve in the near future. Long-term goal, a goal that takes a longer time to accomplish. Cutting back on, reducing the amount you spend or use, like cutting back on eating out. Determined, feeling strongly motivated to achieve something.
These are natural and useful phrases you can use when talking about your goals. Let's practice them together.
Now it's your turn. Share one short-term and one long-term goal in the comments. Don't be shy. We'd love to hear your ideas.
And here's another question. What's one thing you're doing today to move closer to your goal? Let's listen to the conversation between Emily and Jack again, but this time we'll slow it down.
Hey Jack, do you have any goals you're working on these days?
Yeah, actually. My short-term goal is to save enough money to buy a new laptop by next month.
That's a great goal. How are you saving up?
I'm cutting back on eating out and making coffee at home instead of buying it every day. It's amazing how much I can save by doing that. What about you?
Well, my short-term goal is to wake up an hour earlier every day so I can exercise before work.
That's a healthy habit. Do you have any long-term goals?
Definitely. I want to run a marathon someday. It'll take a lot of training, but I'm determined.
Now let's talk about how to set and achieve your goals. Sarah, what's one short-term goal you're working on right now?
I'm working on reading one book every month. It's manageable and keeps me learning. What about you?
My short-term goal is to improve my photography skills. I'm watching tutorials and practicing on weekends.
That's fantastic. What's your long-term goal with photography?
Eventually, I'd love to create a portfolio and maybe even sell my photos online. What's your long-term goal with reading?
I'd like to write my own book someday. Reading helps me learn about different writing styles and gain inspiration.
That's inspiring. Listeners, what about you? What's a long-term goal that excites you? Share it with us in the comments.
You know, James, when I was learning French, I set a short-term goal of practicing 15 minutes a day. It felt small, but it added up over time.
That's such a good example. I remember setting a short-term goal to cook a new recipe every week. It was fun, and it built my confidence in the kitchen.
Those small, consistent steps really make a difference. Listeners, think about this. What's one small step you can take today to work toward your goal?
And don't forget, it's okay to make mistakes along the way. Mistakes are part of the learning process.
So, James, let's start with you. What's a short-term goal you're working on right now?
Let's see. My short-term goal is to read one book every month. It's a habit I want to build to improve my knowledge and relax after work. What about you?
Oh, that's a great goal. My short-term goal is to improve my cooking skills. I'm trying to make one new recipe every week.
That's interesting. So far, have you discovered a new favorite dish?
Yes, I made homemade pizza last week, and it turned out amazing. It was much better than I expected.
That sounds delicious. For our listeners, take a moment to think about your short-term goals. Maybe it's something small, like learning a new word in English every day or exercising more.
Let's practice asking about short-term goals. I'll ask, and you answer. What's one thing you want to achieve this month? Great. Keep practicing. Now, let's move to long-term goals. James, do you have a big goal for the future?
Definitely. My long-term goal is to write a novel. I've always loved storytelling, and I want to create a book that people will enjoy. What about you?
That's an ambitious and exciting goal. For me, I want to travel to at least 10 new countries in the next 5 years. I want to explore new cultures and see different parts of the world.
I love that. Travel teaches you so much. Let's discuss the difference between short-term and long-term goals for our listeners.
Great idea. Short-term goals are things you can accomplish in a short time, like days, weeks, or a few months. For example, saving money to buy a new phone or studying for an exam.
And long-term goals usually take years to achieve. They require more time, effort, and planning, like becoming fluent in English or starting your own business.
Let's practice answering questions about long-term goals. James, ask our listeners a question.
Sure. What's a big goal you want to achieve in the next 5 years? Great job. Keep thinking about your goals. Now, let's talk about making plans. Sarah, how do you plan to achieve your goal of traveling to 10 countries?
Well, I've started saving money every month in a separate travel fund. I also research affordable destinations and make a list of places I want to visit first. What about your plan for writing a novel?
I try to write a little every day, even if it's just for 10 or 15 minutes. It helps me stay consistent. I'm also reading books to learn from other writers.
Those are solid plans. For our listeners, remember that every goal needs a plan. Let's practice.
I'll give an example. I want to improve my English. My plan is to listen to podcasts every day and learn 5 new words each week.
Now it's your turn. Answer this. What's your goal and how do you plan to achieve it? Excellent. Keep practicing making sentences like this.
Before we wrap up, let's talk about some common challenges when working on goals. Sarah, what do you think?
Oh, there are many. One big challenge is staying motivated. Sometimes you feel tired or discouraged.
True. For me, it's about managing time. Life can get busy, and it's hard to find time for your goals.
So, what's a good solution for these challenges?
I think it helps to break your goal into smaller steps. For example, if you want to read more, start with just 10 minutes a day.
I agree. Also, celebrate small successes. Every time you reach a small milestone, reward yourself.
That's great advice. Let's ask our listeners. What's the hardest part of achieving your goals, and how do you overcome it?
let's talk a little more about setting realistic goals. Sometimes people set goals that are too big or vague. James, what's your advice for making goals more achievable?
Good question. One technique I use is the SMART method. Have you heard of it?
Oh, yes. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, right?
Exactly. For example, instead of saying, I want to learn English, you can say, I want to learn 50 new words in the next month. That's specific and measurable.
And it's achievable because 50 words in a month means about 2 words a day, which isn't overwhelming. It's also relevant if your goal is improving your language skills.
Right, and it's time-bound because you've given yourself a deadline, 1 month.
Let's practice this idea with our listeners. Take a moment and think about one of your goals. Now, make it smart. Ask yourself, is it specific? Can you measure it? Is it achievable for you? Is it relevant to your life or dreams? Have you set a clear deadline?
Great. Now let's go a step further. Sarah, do you ever share your goals with others to stay accountable?
Yes, I do. Telling someone about my goals helps me stay focused. For example, I told my friend about my cooking goal, and now she asks me every week, "What new recipe did you try?"
That's a good idea. For me, I like using apps to track my progress. For example, I use a fitness app to log my exercise, or a writing app to keep track of my novel.
Accountability can really make a difference. Listeners, think about this. Who can you share your goals with to stay motivated?
Another thing to consider is celebrating your achievements. Sarah, how do you reward yourself when you accomplish a goal?
Oh, I love treating myself to something small. For example, after mastering a tricky recipe, I might buy a new kitchen tool or eat out at my favorite restaurant.
That's nice. For me, it's usually taking a break to watch a movie or going on a short trip. It makes the effort feel worth it.
Let's practice this with our listeners. How do you celebrate when you achieve a goal?
Great answers, everyone. Let's not forget. Sometimes we don't reach our goals. And that's okay. It's important to learn from setbacks.
Absolutely. James, can you share a time when you didn't meet a goal and what you learned?
Sure, a few years ago, I planned to run a marathon at sea, but I didn't train consistently. I ended up dropping out. I realized I needed to make smaller goals, like running 5K first, then 10K, before aiming for a marathon.
That's a great lesson. For me, I once tried to learn 3 new skills at the same time: painting, yoga, and photography. I felt overwhelmed and quit all 3. I learned it's better to focus on one goal at a time.
That's so relatable. Listeners, if you've ever faced a challenge or failure with your goals, remember, it's a chance to learn and grow. What's one thing you've learned from a goal you didn't achieve?
This has been such a meaningful discussion. I hope you're all feeling inspired to think about your goals, make plans, and take small steps every day.
Yes, and remember, progress is more important than perfection. Even if you only take one small step today, it's still a step closer to your dream.
James, what are the 3 main things to remember when setting and working on goals?
First, make your goals SMART. Second, have a plan and track your progress. And third, celebrate small wins and learn from setbacks.
You know, James, before we completely wrap up, I think it might be helpful to role-play a conversation about goals for our listeners. What do you think?
That's a fantastic idea. Role-playing is a great way for listeners to hear how real-life conversations might sound. Should we keep it casual, like friends talking?
Yes, definitely casual. Let's say we're 2 friends catching up, talking about our plans and goals. Ready?
Ready.
Hey, James, it's been a while. How are things going with you?
Hey Sarah, things are good, thanks. I've been working on some personal goals lately. What about you?
Same here. I've been focusing on improving my cooking skills. You know, trying to make healthier meals at home. What about you? What's one goal you're working on right now?
That's awesome. For me, I'm trying to get better at running. My goal is to run 5 kilometers without stopping by the end of this month.
Wow, that's a great goal. How's the training going so far?
Pretty good, but it's not easy. I started with short runs, like 2 kilometers, and I'm slowly increasing the distance each week. What about your cooking? Any new recipes lately?
Yes, I made a Thai curry last weekend. It was spicy, but so delicious. I'm thinking of trying homemade bread next.
Bread? That sounds tricky. How are you learning these recipes?
I watch YouTube videos and read cooking blogs. There's so much inspiration online. Do you follow a specific running plan?
Yeah, I use a running app that tells me when to run and when to rest. It's super helpful for staying on track.
That's smart. Do you have a long-term goal with running?
Actually, yes. Eventually, I'd like to run a marathon. It's been a dream of mine for years.
A marathon? That's impressive. I think you can do it if you stay consistent.
Thanks, Sarah. And what about you? Do you have any long-term goals with cooking? Or is it just a fun hobby?
Good question. For now, it's just a hobby. But I've thought about starting a food blog someday. It would be fun to share my recipes and cooking tips.
That's a fantastic idea. You'd inspire so many people to try cooking at home.
Thanks, James. Speaking of inspiration, what motivates you to stick to your running goals?
Honestly, it's thinking about how good I'll feel after achieving them. Also, I have a friend who checks in with me every week. That accountability really helps.
I totally get that. I think having someone to support you makes a big difference.
So, listeners, did you notice how we talked about short-term and long-term goals? James mentioned running 5 kilometers as his short-term goal, and his long-term goal is running a marathon.
And Sarah talked about her cooking journey as a short-term goal, but she also has a long-term vision of starting a food blog.
Now it's your turn to practice. Imagine you're talking to a friend. What would you say if they asked, "What's a goal you're working on right now?"
And what if they asked, "What's your plan to achieve it?"
Keep practicing these kinds of conversations. They'll help you feel more confident speaking about your goals in English.
And remember, it's okay to make mistakes while you practice. The most important thing is to keep trying.
That's right. Let's give our listeners one last question to think about. What's one thing you can do today to move closer to your goal?
Such a powerful question.
Before we go, James, let's share some quick tips for staying motivated while working on goals. What's your number one tip?
For me, it's breaking big goals into smaller steps. When you focus on small achievements, it feels less overwhelming. Plus, every small win boosts your confidence.
That's a great one. I'd say my tip is to write down your goals and review them often. When you see your goals on paper, it reminds you of what you're working toward and keeps you focused.
That's true. Writing things down makes a big difference. Another tip is to find a role model, or someone who has already achieved a similar goal. Seeing their journey can inspire you to keep going.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, rewarding yourself. Even small rewards can keep you excited and motivated.
So true. Listeners, think about this. What's one small reward you can give yourself for completing a step toward your goal?
Speaking of rewards, do you know what my reward is for sticking to my goals, James?
What is it?
The feeling of pride and accomplishment. Honestly, nothing beats looking back and saying, "I did that."
I agree 100%. It's such a great feeling.
All right, listeners, let's review everything we talked about today. First, we discussed short-term and long-term goals, like improving specific skills or working toward a big dream.
Then, we talked about the importance of making your goals SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
We also shared practical strategies like staying consistent, being accountable, celebrating small wins, and learning from setbacks.
And we had some fun practicing real conversations about goals, which is great for building your English skills.
Finally, we gave you some quick tips to stay motivated, like breaking goals into smaller steps, writing them down, and rewarding yourself.
Remember, setting goals isn't just about achieving things. It's also about growing as a person and learning new skills along the way.
Yes. And don't forget, you're not alone. We're here to support you. And so is the community of listeners who are on this journey with you. Let's wrap up with a final exercise. Imagine you're having a conversation with a friend about their goals. Here's your challenge. Ask your friend what their short-term goal is. Ask how they plan to achieve it. Share one of your goals with them.
That's a great exercise. If you can, try practicing with a real friend or even speaking in front of a mirror. The more you practice, the better you'll get.
And don't forget to share your thoughts with us. You can comment or send us a message about your goals and how you're practicing English.
We'd love to hear from you. Your progress inspires us to keep making these episodes.
That's right. So, until next time, keep setting goals, taking steps forward, and practicing your English. This has been such a fun and inspiring conversation. We hope you feel motivated to set and achieve your own personal goals.
Absolutely. Remember, every big dream starts with small steps. And as you work on your goals, you're also improving your English. 2 achievements in 1.
Don't forget to leave a comment telling us about your goals. And check out our latest episodes for more fun and useful conversations.
Thanks for listening to English Conversations. Keep dreaming, keep learning, and keep moving forward.
See you next time. Bye for now.
Take care, everyone.